Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate your time and attention on a Monday where there seems to be a lot going on. I myself will be hopping off the call right at 11 to drive to another event, and it just feels like there's a lot going on today. So I appreciate the beginning of the week started with the Forbes Funds and GPNP. Hopefully there will be some space on this call to be able to take a breath, set some intentions of the week, think about how we can be successful in our work, but also in being a grounding support to those within the ecosystem. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. We're really excited for the conversation today because we have not one but two speakers. First, we'll be joined by Tatiana Martinez from the Women and Girls Foundation, and then Katie Schaible from Bridgeway Capital. Katie and I had a conversation last Friday for some really important up-and-coming opportunities for Bridgeway in terms of asset management to benefit nonprofits. And you may recall that's an ongoing conversation since last year. We were talking about the Rainy Day Fund with a couple members of the Bridgeway team as well. So we're really excited to kind of use our hour to the best of our ability this morning. For those of you who are new to the call, because I do see some new names, these calls began in March of 2020. It began as a space to share resources and opportunities with the nonprofit sector, create a conduit and relationship building opportunity with funders and those who were providing immediate assistance or resources for support in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic when everything was very much up in the air, similar to how it feels now. And so this was a space for community members to convene, come together, connect, and enhance our understanding of both the short and long-term community needs. It's blossomed since that time to also include an overview of actions that are impacting our regional nonprofit sector in Southwest PA, whether that be federal, state, global, and really creating a space to connect with the speakers who are experts in these different areas. Since March of 2020, we've hosted 5,622 of these calls with over 48,000 participants. We hit 48,008 participants this week, actually. So again, we appreciate your time and attention. And the framework for these calls follows the same as all Forbes Funds and GPNP work, which is aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the social determinants of health. The intention of this alignment is not for us to create more metrics or frameworks or prompts to have folks try to chameleon fund and make their work fit a specific group of words or language or model, but really to create continuity and alignment within the sector when an organization doing housing work and an organization do education work, both need a partner when it comes to healthcare accessibility and quality, and they're very aligned in making sure that those they serve have wraparound supports in that specific area. And so thinking through, as we're using this call time this morning to reflect and breathe and kind of take a moment, thinking through how some of your work might dovetail with Tatiana's or what Katie shares as an opportunity is really important. And then finally, the 8 returns on investment, or 8 returns, I guess. We have the return on assets, return on equity, return on investment, return on policy, return on relationships, return on sustainability, return on technology, and return on well-being. There are a lot of different ways that we can measure the impact of the nonprofit sector. But a lot of the impacts that we see are very intangible or kind of squishy when it comes to review and the ways that we can report those successfully. And so recognizing that even if the return isn't an increase of funding or an immediate policy change, if there's a relationship built, if the work becomes more sustainable, if there's new technology being leveraged so it can continue to be done successfully or scaled, then that's worth it. And I would love to see the return on well-being just from these community calls because they've been such a great space for support for our members of GPNP and other members of the ecosystem with the Forbes Funds. So if you'd like to take a moment at this moment to put your name and your organization in the chat, that would be wonderful, just so we can know who's on the call this morning and our speakers can directly speak to some of the organizations they may have relationships with already. It's an opportunity to better connect, and we recognize that there are some folks probably in transit in that event. Please do not turn on your camera, but if you're in a space to turn on your camera so we can see your reactions and the connection points that really resonate with folks on the call, we also very much appreciate that. And then towards the end of the call, as a reminder, we'll be launching the poll while I'm giving the public policy update. That feedback is critical for us because we need to know, especially right now, how we can rapidly respond to a lot of the conversations taking place and the needs that are being identified and elevated within the nonprofit sector, but really the social impact sector more broadly. So again, I'm really excited to have both Tatiana and Katie joining us this morning. Tatiana is the Director of Operations for the Women and Girls Foundations of Southwest PA, and she's going to share updates on WGF programming, opportunities, and successes. And then Katie, who is the Director of Programs at Bridgeway Capital, is going to be giving information on their REEN program that teaches nonprofits about purchasing and managing property. Tatiana, oh, sorry, this is getting covered by a pop-up, immigrated from southern Peru at the age of 20. After graduating from the University of Vermont, Tatiana joined UVM's Mosaic Center for Students of Color as the office manager. She holds an MBA from Chaplin College, and her capstone project focusing on proposing a study abroad program managed by the MCSC with a curriculum tailored to students of color. She completed the Coro Fellowship for Public Policy in May of 2022. Yay, Coro. Big fan of Coro. Bree's on our team because of Coro. Throughout the fellowship, she engaged with diverse communities, gaining a deep understanding of organizational structures across the government, business, nonprofit, and innovation sectors. Tatiana spearheaded various policy-related projects that advanced the missions of her host organizations, including budgetary policy, HR and operations, policy development, market analysis, DEI training, and consulting. Her final placement at the Pittsburgh Metropolitan Area Hispanic Chamber of Commerce resulted in a position where she managed their pilot Entradas mentoring programming and Business Success Academy, while also serving as a liaison to provide resources to the Pittsburgh Latino community. Tatiana's passion lies in policymaking and community advocacy, and she is constantly seeking opportunities to acquire new skills and forge meaningful connections. Currently, she serves as Director of Operations at the Women and Girls Foundation in Pittsburgh, and it is in that capacity that we're excited to welcome her to the call. For that welcome, I'll turn it over to Fred Brown, our President and CEO. Fred, please open the conversation, and then Tatiana, the floor will be yours.
Well, I'm excited to have these two stalwarts on to talk about and ask the deeper question. Oftentimes our work is founded by this notion of knowing, but we're in uncertainty. And so what are the types of questions we need to pose, not just to ourselves, but to our partners? And so today's conversation is important because it talks about what is the role of physical space. What is the role of our counter narratives with regards to race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic strata and gender? And so when we think about this work and we think about the opportunities, there's a unique space that we're now in to ask deeper questions as opposed to thinking we have the answers. And so I'm humbled to be on today's call to listen, learn, and explore what is possible, but also, moreover, our human safety net has been unraveled. And it's up to us to realign it, to restructure it. Nobody's coming to save us. And so this notion of being independent, I feel like is a questionable narrative because we are relying on each other. And so I'm interested to hear how we think about how we listen to each other and support each other, and how some of our solutions may add value to other people, and sometimes how our solutions are wanting. Like, how do we need to look more deeply at what we're providing as potential solutions and or ways to give. And so I'm honored to be on today's call to listen, learn, and thank you guys for being on. And I turn it back over to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Tatiana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fred, and thank you, Emily, for the opportunity. And as you were talking, Fred, you really got me thinking about the work that we have been doing and how basically our whole mission, it's all the language that we use is basically now in the list of words that we shouldn't be using. Even the fact that my name says Tatiana Martinez, she, her, ella, it's now an act of defiance. And as I was talking to Emily earlier, even the fact of my own citizenship is a question mark now for me too, you know? And so I'm glad that we have these spaces, because the fact that we are here speaking about all the things that we can do in itself is an act of defiance. I'm Tatiana Martinez. she, her, ella, and I work with the Women and Girls Foundation. Hopefully technology won't fail me today, and I will be able to share kind of quick presentation as I tell you a little more about the Women and Girls Foundation. Can you all see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and as of now, I cannot see the chat, so thank you, Emily. I appreciate you. We break barriers so every girl can rise and every woman can soar. And then when we think about barriers, we are thinking about economic barriers, health barriers. Barriers is such a broad word that it encompasses so many aspects of life. The fact that our Constitution wasn't created with women in mind. Women of color, of course, even less. Men of color, even less. So breaking barriers being such a powerful word and the phrase, our work has been about breaking financial barriers, breaking the barriers of education, especially for underserved communities lately. Let me see. Is it moving? There we go. Okay, so the Women and Girls Foundation, and I'm not going to try to read, but we are having conversations about our language, and it's kind of, it is a bit sad for me to speak about this, because when we are talking about women, we're also talking about femmes and self-identified women in pursuit of this mission. We do programmatic work, we do advocacy work, and as time has passed, our organization has changed some of the approaches that we have done, but no, the essence of the work has remained the same. Breaking barriers for self-identified women in Pittsburgh and beyond. We are part of the coalition that is advocating for the Pay Family Leave campaign at the state level, and at the city level, we are part of the coalition advocating for the Level Up Pay Equity campaign, and we're going to talk about them shortly. So just to give you an idea of our organization, we have 3 arms. We have the advocacy, the education, and the grassroots grant making. And to start with the advocacy, like I said before, we are part of the coalition who started the Family Care Act campaign. And this is work that has been for many years already. Unfortunately, it hasn't passed in Pennsylvania, and we wonder if it will pass in the next few years. And basically, the importance of the Pay Family Leave. We are a 501c3, so I want to start saying this because we walk a very fine line between lobbying and advocating. We are an educational civic engagement organization. I want to start with that. We don't lobby, but the work that we do looks like we are lobbying. In reality, what we are doing is educating the communities about what is the bigger impact, the economic impact, the mental health impact of having the Family Care Act passing for Pennsylvania. And in many aspects, typically it's women who end up being the caregivers. I'm saying typically because we have also crossed paths with a lot of men who end up being the caregivers of their parents or their children or their spouse. And so it is a campaign that not only affects women, it affects us all. We feel that passing the bill would be important because we would increase, as a state, economic stability, having medical cost reduction, a lifetime of savings for women. We would be able to have, especially for those who are single-parent households, saving money on childcare costs would be very important. So in the long run, it sounds so interesting talking about this because it's no brainer. In the long run, the savings would be also for the government and for the state of Pennsylvania. So a lot of our advocacy work is that education that we are providing to empower the community, to call their legislators, to try and advocate more for making it pass. We are now seeing that public reaction is very important in how we navigate our reactions and how we advocate for ourselves now more than ever it's being heard. At the local level, we are advocates for the Level Up Greater Pittsburgh Pay Equity Campaign. I'm sorry, it's Monday, too early for me. And basically, we are hoping that in the city of Pittsburgh, hold on, I'm gonna move this because I see faces, beautiful faces, but I want to see some of the text to help myself too. So as a Latina, I'm going to say, the total Pittsburgh population of Latinos has increased by 7.8% in the last 2-3 years. And Latinos ourselves, we make 52 cents of the dollars on average, especially women. And so when we think about that, I'm just trying to think my thoughts to express the importance of this. The lack of equity also has an impact. When we don't think about equity as a general thing, it does have an impact in all of us, including white men. The lack of advancement has an impact on the whole community. We are collaborating with the Black Women's Policy Center and the YWCA of Greater Pittsburgh. We have joined forces and we are hoping for structural reforms to close that gender pay. So those are our advocacy arms. On the programmatic arm, this is our baby. And some of you may have heard of it. And if not, let me tell you, this is our pride and joy, GirlGov. And GirlGov has been with us right from the beginning. It's a program, to make it very clear quickly, we basically teach high schoolers how government runs. There are things that we are not being taught in school. For example, how to run a campaign. How do we pass a law? What are the components of passing a law? GirlGov is a non-partisan program. It's a free program, after-school program. And we are teaching girls who choose to be in the program is basically the logistics of how our government runs. And many of these logistics, we don't know them. Obviously, I wasn't born in the United States, but I wish I had that kind of understanding when I was in college, for example. And I keep hearing many women in the community who are out of high school and they are saying, yes, I wish I had learned this. GirlGov is not only a program that is for women who are interested in politics or policy. Actually, we have students who are interested in the arts. And the truth is that some of the biggest advocates that we've had globally are artists. GirlGov allows these girls the opportunity to learn how to advocate for themselves, understand the systems of oppression, but also understands their own government. And that is powerful in itself, because when they get out of GirlGov, they're able to talk fluently. They're able to articulate their thoughts. They're able to understand research. And so for many years, all of our alumni have gone into very different directions. And we're very proud to see where they have gone. And GirlGov is a program that has shaped in many aspects, even the careers of many of these students. We have a visionary CEO who has this thought about closing the gap, because GirlGov can be a program that the demographics of GirlGov lately have not been that diverse. And so we wanted intentionally to create an after school pipeline in the middle school. Girl Golf program. Right now, this is the second year that we're running it, and it is very successful. The curriculum looks a little bit different, and obviously because of age restrictions, and we are running with students that are predominantly Black or predominantly underserved. We have joined with Propel Partners, and we are in Braddock, and we are in Homestead. And so the after-school program now for middle school is we hope that it becomes a pipeline, so when these students graduate to high school, they choose to join Girl Golf. So that's our baby Girl Golf. And then our philanthropic arm, it's a small arm, but here we are giving the work, and it's the Femisphere Community Grants. These are micro grants that we offer, no strings attached, to organizations that are doing civic engagement, organizations that may be very small, grassroots, to whom, say, $2,000, $3,000 may make a difference. And as we are having conversations about civic engagement, we're not thinking about voting rights anymore. We are thinking civic engagement as a bigger thing for us. Churches, for example, can do civic engagement. We're thinking about civic engagement from the perspective of organizations that care to serve women and girls. How do they serve it? It can be very different. Civic engagement can be really cleaning the streets. Civic engagement can be, for us, do volunteer work. So we are now expanding a little more this arm, so as to not to restrict it to just voting education, but also organizations that are just organizations that care. With this effort, we provide grants once a year, and we are because of in August, we have the celebration of the 19th Amendment. We have the community to vote on nominate organizations, and the organizations with higher nomination numbers come to a ballot, an electronic ballot, and then the community gets to vote who gets the grants. The organizations that don't get voted most still get $500 grants. And right now, our community grants are a very small arm. We're hoping to grow it in the future. We are just trying to sustain and have a relationship with the community in aspects that, for example, our mission is very civic engagement driven, but by helping them and by supporting their work, we are trying to connect with those organizations, helping them flourish. So that's it. That's the gist of what we do, and I'm grateful for having the floor and having the opportunity to talk to all of you and tell you who we are and what we do.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. And I am opening the chat for anybody to offer additional questions. But one thing that is so clear as you're talking about the different types of programs that you have and the purpose of each of them is that there's such clear alignment and how they might build on each other. Do you have any success stories or instances where an organization or individual has participated in one program and kind of like graduated through to focus on like the civic engagement piece, being part of your advocacy and lobbying work? And can you just share a little bit about what that has looked like?
Yes. So Girl Golf would be the perfect example of this. Every year we see them graduate, and I also come from higher education and student affairs. And so to see students graduate is kind of a gift. And we have made contact with many alums who speak about, especially the ability to do research and the ability to speak in public. Girl Golf was able to give them that opportunity to talk to people. Part of our graduation is that, so part of the program, the students, and this is high school, students choose topics that they want to talk about. And by talk about, meaning they will work the whole year to do projects related to these topics, typically 2 or 3 topics, so we can create committees. And then at the end of the year, in graduation time, each committee exposes and talks about what they have learned, but also the work that they have done. So, for example, 2 years ago, we had one of the committees who did a study on maternity, Black maternity health. And they ended up doing a whole documentary on Black maternity health. And it was a powerful documentary that we saw the day of graduation. So at the time of graduation, they get to present their project. Another cohort, for example, created a whole database in an app about resources for LGBTQIA resources for the city for individuals who identify as LGBTQIA. And so when we think about this, these are students who are in high school, and this is their after school program, and the amount of information that they have gathered and presented to the community is really powerful. So the success stories, they are all a success story for us. The fact that they graduated and many of them are now going to college. Many of them are going to college, and their ability to advocate for themselves, that's the success story for us.
Thank you so much. And I also want to thank you for the very intentional and inclusive language that you use, because making sure that, yes, from an expectation management and communication standpoint, but also that trust and safety and inclusivity standpoint. I think from the descriptions of your programs to hearing the way you speak about graduates, it's clear that this is just such a wonderful and welcoming, living of your mission. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And Fred, did you have any final thoughts or questions before I turn it over to Katie this morning?
The only question I have is, and this is from the Latinx perspective, is how can we figure out a pathway to better support the region's Latinx community, given the stresses and shocks that exist within our ecosystem and with this administration's focal points? And what are the ways we can better embed universal practices to support everybody and not just a specific group?
Oh, wow, it's a big question, because when I'm thinking about the whole spectrum of Latinx, just to give you an idea of the spectrum, there's Latinx who are, even when we are thinking about undocumented Latinx, there's 2 different kinds of undocumented Latinx individuals. There's those who enter through a port of entry, and then there's those who cross the border. Those who enter a port of entry are undocumented Latinx who probably overstayed, well, actually they did overstay their visa, and they can be forgiven by the government still. But those who cross the border, they basically do not exist in the government of the United States system. And so from that group, there's the DACA individuals, their parents, DAPA. So the whole spectrum. And then when we think about the racial implications of being Latino, we are as a whole community, we are so different, and the needs are different. So out of the top of my head, and having parents who don't speak any English in the United States, I can tell you the first thing is supporting English learning programs. That would be a thing that for me as a Latina, and for anyone who has come to this country who does not speak the language, whether they have documentation or not. It's a very important mission. The Latino community supports the community, even those who are not documented, even those who are working under the table, as basically anyone who is undocumented. I'm just focusing on Latinos because there's really undocumented immigrants from all over the world in the United States. But they're paying taxes, and many of them don't take the resources that that they would need to. Many Latinos, for example, don't go to the hospital because now, obviously, for fear, but hospital costs are really skyrocketing. So, to your question, Fred, wow, it's a big question. We are trying to collaborate with both Casa San Jose and Latino Community Center. We had the intention, and we had dates with them. We are leaving them not leaving, that's not the word. We are waiting a little bit because they are overwhelmed with all the work that they have to do. But we are reconnecting with them soon to figure out ways in which we can collaborate. In the past, we have provided microgrants to both Latino Community Center and Casa San Jose, and those being the organizations that support mostly all the Latino populations, including undocumented organizations. How can we support Latinos? Teaching them to speaking English. There is so much information. That is the first thing that comes to my mind. Even of some of my undocumented friends who don't understand a lot of the system. The executive orders that are coming every day that impact directly their lives, they don't understand it because they don't speak English. But here they are. I mean, they are producing for this country. They are providing services for very low wages. So I'm not going to advocate for hire an undocumented individual, but I'm saying that supporting programs that provide free language or very low cost language support, that would be my first recommendation. As a Latina, but also coming from the perspective of the Women and Girls Foundation, language is also a barrier for them. And so, especially for women, and understanding how the United States works is it took me 5 years at least to understand the system of government, and I still don't even have full understanding. And so imagine those who are here, who are working more than 12 hours a day, and they sometimes don't have time to learn because they're too exhausted. If you're working 12 hours in construction, you're gonna be exhausted at the end of the day. And so it's a cycle, right? It keeps you working, you're just here to work. And the brilliance of many of these individuals is fantastic to see that they are here. I mean, all to see them that they are here, but at the same time, providing resources is very complicated. So language would be my first recommendation here. And I guess it would be my biggest recommendation here. Once we understand what's happening in our surroundings, we can try and make decisions and figure out what to do.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. And I don't see any additional questions in the chat, but if anybody does have follow-up questions, would you mind leaving your email in the chat in addition to the information that you have on the slide?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate you joining us this morning. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Katie Schaible from Bridgeway Capital. And Katie, I know that you have a presentation for us this morning. And then if anyone has any questions about follow-up resources, I'll ask you the same to add your email to the chat before departing this morning. But thank you so much for joining us. And the floor is now yours. Thank you, Tatiana.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Before I turn the tables over to what I have going on, Tatiana, thank you so much for the work you're doing. And you know, your point about language, I just wanted to piggyback off of that. It's so important. But let me add to that, as a citizen, of America who has no worries, right? I'm privileged, right? I feel that it's my duty to learn Spanish. And I think it goes both ways. And I'm actually taking language classes at the Spanish place. I would love to do it somewhere else, right? Any other places, but every time I go in, I feel slightly rebellious that it's like the one thing that I can do. So I'm lessening the burden on the immigrant population having to learn all of English. Maybe I can bridge a gap by learning their language too. So I think that's another thing that we can do as citizens is to learn the language ourselves. So just wanted to echo that. So anyways, well, thank you so much for having me. Emily, my cat just jumped on the table, so I think I'm gonna get video bombed here in a second. So apologies if you see a cat jumping in the screen, but my name's Katie Schaible. I work for Bridgeway Capital. I'm the programs director. I run a number of programs around Bridgeway Capital. But the one that I have up and coming for nonprofits, we call it REEN, REEN, and it stands for Real Estate Essentials for Nonprofits. And what this is, it's a program that it runs in May. There's 3 classes that's more of a group type dynamic with a professional real estate company called Altair, and they talk to the group. We're going to accept 10 leaders from nonprofits. They'll talk to the group in generalities about strategy and operations and finance, but then afterwards you get to have technical assistance, a one-on-one relationship with this professional for a number of months to address your own issues as well. So this program's about to launch, and Emily, you mentioned I have a presentation. I don't have a presentation, I have a website, so I'm just going to walk you through the website and show you where the things to apply, the buttons to apply are. And we do have information session coming up on March 25th, 25th at noon, where we're going to just talk way more in depth about this. And hopefully I can convince you to sign up for the REEN program. So let me screen share really quick. Everyone can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great. So I'll just show you where to navigate for more information just to start off with. There's my cat. Put a fur on the camera. So if you go to bridgewaycapital.org, that's the homepage. And to navigate to REEN, you would go to the entrepreneurship hub right here. And then you would scroll down to Real Estate Essentials for Nonprofits. And that is where there's a whole bunch of information on the real estate essentials for nonprofit program. But I just want to call your attention to a few things on this page. We have the apply now button. The deadline to apply is April 14th at noon. It doesn't need to be an executive director. Anyone who can represent the nonprofit who is in a decision-making capacity or can be an influencer, but somebody who could also have access to view and get financial documents, that could be a few people on nonprofit teams. They're welcome to join, but we do ask that it's the same person that stays throughout the group sessions because the knowledge builds on itself. There is a component that we have too. So I guess I neglected to tell you that Bridgeway Capital is a community development financial institution. So the CD part of community development, that is what I do in programs. I run programs, I try to support organizations, I help small businesses grow, but then we have a financial institution side of what we do at Bridgeway, and that's our bread and butter. And so the way that that integrates with this REEN program is that we have something called a rainy day loan fund. You don't have to go through REEN to have access to the rainy day loan fund. You learn about it. You can get deeper in with Bridgeway. You can start to assess if it's a good fund for you and your organization. But the rainy day loan fund is really important because it's a 0% loan up to $100,000, but it's only for emergencies. So it's kind of one of those things you need if you have a roof that starts leaking one day, or your power goes out and you need emergency electrical support. It is a fund that you can have access to dip into as emergencies come forth if you own real estate. So we'll be exploring that in the program as well. But again, even if you don't take the REEN program, Bridgeway still has this rainy day loan fund, which I'm happy to talk about at any point in time to people. A couple things for this program to draw your, just to make you aware of is the eligibility. We say in the greater Pittsburgh region, that's because it's Bridgeway's footprint, but really we're trying to get people in person. So anyone who's willing to commute to the Pittsburgh region, all the classes will be held somewhere in the Pittsburgh area. And as long as you're in southwestern Pennsylvania as well. So if you meet those two qualifications for your location, you'd be eligible for this program. We are targeting nonprofits with an operating budget over $300,000. And that's because that gets you in the area where you start to probably think that real estate might be something that could really benefit your company as investing in an asset. The other thing that I wanted to point out, and it's down here, it's a 2-phased approach. It's 3 group classes. We're going to run from May 7th to May 21st or 24th. It wraps up right before Memorial Day. So it's like 3 weeks back to back of group sessions where we talk about strategy with the professional. And I want to point out too that it's for both types of organizations, either if they own their own building already and they just want to think about like, oh man, what are the repairs that I have to do on my building? Like, what am I not thinking about? Or how can I leverage this asset as something that can help my cash flow situation or something like that, right? Everybody's unique needs are unique. But it's also for organizations who don't yet own real estate, but we call them, real estate curious, right? Who are really approaching wanting to either learn about real estate or like really thinking that this is going to be for them in their future. And then we go into the one-on-one technical assistance where your specific needs are met, where you get to talk about your specifications with an expert. So I wanted to point that out. Tom Hardy and Amy Murdoch, they didn't give me headshots. I guess some people are photo shy, but they're really great. They own a company called Altair. We use them for many, many things at Bridgeway. I think they've been around the nonprofit ecosystem in Pittsburgh for a while. They will be putting on the group sessions. I wish it could be me, but I'm not an expert in real estate. Maybe one day I will be, but I'll be there to help facilitate and move it along. But I have hired experts to come in and really dig into all the nitty-gritties about running and owning real estate. Other than that, this page gives you everything you need to know about like when the group sessions are going to be. It's every Wednesday. It's a 4 to 6 time frame. If you sign up, we're looking for people to host the group sessions. I think that's really cool because we could bounce around to different locations and we could use your particular building as a backdrop to gauge the conversation around. I think that would be it's going to be really neat to really have be in a setting that we can just point to things like, look at these windows, look at these roofs, look at how this all runs, look at these how this building has multiple tenants to help afford it, or everybody's gonna be different. So it's just peer learning and peer sharing and jumping around to different locations to keep it fresh and dynamic. And that is about it. And the last thing that I want to call to your attention on this page is that there is this other blue bar that says register for the virtual information session on Tuesday, March 25th. It is at noon. And it's where we're just going to be digging into this a little bit deeper. So if you have more questions, if you want to learn more about it, I'll be doing a quick virtual information session coming up. And we'd love for you to click that button, take you to Eventbrite, and register for that.
Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And I did see a note, because you mentioned multiple organizations kind of sharing buildings. For the real estate program, you mentioned organizations with $30,000 or $300,000 more in their budget. Would multiple organizations be able to attend if they're looking to share a single building to be able to take advantage of that? Because we have a lot of organizations that are co-located, partnering, kind of creating like incubators. I think about, the community center that UPMC hosts in the East End, or the organizations that are taking advantage of Cohatch. Is there any sort of opportunity for organizations to come in as partners, or does there typically have to be like a single organization with that budget that is their own?
No, they could. I would definitely be open for people signing up as a partnership. I think that's a really interesting model to figure out how two entities splitting it can both leverage the assets. I don't know how that, would come into play with the rainy day loan fund. But I think that would be a really great topic to discuss, and potentially a model that other people want to learn about and maybe copy in the future. So yes, sign up.
Thank you so much. And if you wouldn't mind, I say Chris has a question in the chat. If you can directly link the registration for the info session, or even share the
Yep.
link for the page you were looking at. And then Michael Edwards from Fayette, he said that the Fayette County Cultural Trust, which Michael, I believe you're on the board at the Cultural Trust in Fayette County, was able to take advantage of when they needed a new roof for the building. So already some
great.
folks in the ecosystem have been able to take advantage of that.
Yay. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for sharing.
Very literal application of rainy day fund, it sounds like. I am going to roll into the policy update, but before I do that, Bree, would you mind launching the poll just so we can have folks answering questions in the background as I'm present? Oh, awesome. Thank you. All right. Here's our policy updates for today. Before I get to policy updates, I do want to share that this Wednesday from noon to 2:30 at Alloy 26 Nova Place, we are hosting our third AI for Social Impact Demo Day. We already have over 160 registrants, and I understand that some folks won't be able to make it, but we can anticipate probably 120, 130 folks in the crowd. This is an opportunity for all of the current participants of our AI for Social Impact cohorts to present how AI has changed the way that they do their work, at least one person on staff, the way that they do their position day to day, and also how they're managing AI as employees versus as a tool to continue doing business as usual as nonprofit organizations. So we'll be launching multiple AI employees into the sector, 2 per organization that is participating, and presenting what the kind of job description for this AI on behalf of an organization is. It's a really great time to hear about how innovation and technology can be championed by the nonprofit sector versus how they are impacting the nonprofit sector. We saw a couple of articles, one from Stanford Social Innovation Review that was kind of a preliminary discussion around AI and how we can anticipate its impact as it's implemented by other sectors on the nonprofit sector. Really reiterating that what we're doing here in Pittsburgh and in Westmoreland County, and hopefully some other counties in Southwest PA in the very near future, like Butler, Lawrence, and Mercer counties, is really paving the way for how we can think about expertise within the nonprofit sector as expertise for shaping how technology can be utilized ethically and responsibly within our organizations and respond to the needs of the most resilient among us. Looking at some updates just from yesterday's executive orders, the Institute of Museum and Library Services is coming under fire in a recent executive order signed by President Trump that would pull funding for libraries and museums across the United States. This is something that a lot of folks, I've spoken to multiple members of the library system here in Southwest PA and also our museums here in Pittsburgh. This was expected. It is part of a broader effort to reduce federal bureaucracy by targeting agencies that are deemed unnecessary for funding specifically from the federal level. So the posture that has been expressed across a lot of these eliminations has been, it should be something that is handled by the state. There's a lot of nuance that's not discussed, though, in terms of the amount of federal funding that goes from the federal government to the state government and then gets administered by county government that is lost in this conversation on a national stage. So the takeaway is that, yes, this funds, or this elimination does threaten federal funding for libraries and museums, and it is going to impact operations and services. The impact on nonprofit organizations in Southwest PA specifically are going to face secondary and tertiary effects of this. For example, one of the former GPNP membership benefits was Candid FDO. And when Candid moved their access to FDO, the foundation, directly online to be able to scope grant making prior to AI was available to do that. It made it difficult for members to access it because folks had to come directly into our office. So for member organizations from Fayette County, Greene County, Mercer County, Lawrence County, it really disincentivizes use of that resource. And so when people would ask for it, I would encourage them to go to their libraries because most library systems have a subscription for Candid FDO and offer trainings on it to make sure that it can be maximized by organizations. Well, all we could offer at the time during COVID was a 24-hour access link without the additional trainings and resources. And so not only are libraries integral for community members, but nonprofit organizations that rely on a lot of the services and academic materials that can be only accessed through libraries for a cost-efficient partnership are going to be impacted. So things to keep an eye on. As is the case with a lot of executive orders at this point, we don't know if it's going to be implemented the way that it has been drafted. So keeping an eye on responses from Congress, state governments, connecting with elected officials as citizens, not as, on behalf of your 501c3 organization, to express how, that library has impacted your day-to-day life and having conversations that are in that educational space, not, requesting a specific policy or action, but just talking about the value of libraries and museums on the education, especially in an area where Andrew Carnegie put millions of dollars into building up the education of this region, I think is really critical. Looking at, make sure I didn't skip one. Similar vein with federal bureaucracy and Department of Government Efficiency. The Trump administration is continuing efforts to reduce federal bureaucracy. There was an update on the White House website over the weekend, 2 updates actually, that mention the continued efforts to reduce oversight through identifying billions in waste and recommending the elimination or reduction of several agencies and functions. Downsizing of agencies at this point has included requests or directives to cut funding, but also firing of critical staff. We're seeing kind of a mixed response in the federal government at this point, where there are some experts that are being requested back into the office on specific topics that are critical to continuity of programs and the running of the government, while other departments are, or employees of other departments are seeing kind of very surprising communications that they are, not coming back or not going to be coming back into the office. And so there's a lot of uncertainty in the federal sector right now, or in the government sector right now. And the reason that I do mention this, one, the first impact on nonprofit organizations is those that rely on partnerships or funding from the federal agencies. yes, seek alternative resources to adapt to those changes, but also recognizing that there are going to be secondary and tertiary impacts on organizations that receive funding through state or local government from federal agencies that oversee those funds is something that we know is coming. And so keeping an eye on implementation of timelines for agency reductions, potential legal challenges, and emergence of state or private initiatives that fill service gaps led by federal cuts. This is a major topic that we'll be talking about during demo day, because Fred has really taken the Forbes funds into an era of considering what funding diversification and revenue streams really means and how that is a point in time resource. Additionally, how we're engaging our funders from corporate foundations and organizations, individual donors and giving in the philanthropic sector, should include this under kind of this tone of uncertainty on the federal and government side of things. For immigration policies, so the Trump administration's stringent immigration policies from his previous position as president, but also, currently have led to a significant increase in U.S.-bound migrants from Mexico, specifically requesting assistance to return to their home countries, which indicates a shift in migrant attitudes due to heightened border restrictions and dangers faced during transit and once they are here. And so the way that we can see this most clearly is, over the weekend, up until now, there have been a lot of conversations around deportations and, multiple groups of immigrants to the U.S. that were going to be deported and hosted at Guantanamo have come back to the United States. And so we're seeing a lot of pushback and lack of clarity in how a lot of this is being implemented. But the reality is, and the impact on nonprofit organizations, is that nonprofit organizations in Southwest PA providing supports to immigrants and refugees and the communities that support them are already experiencing changes in client demographics and need. We're hearing from some member organizations that there's a decrease in requests from immigrant and refugee communities just for kind of fear of identification or reporting or safety and privacy concerns. And so thinking about how, similar to how Tatiana shared at the beginning of the call today, making things accessible through translating them, making sure that our resources and opportunities are being shared in a way that is inclusive and welcoming for the resources that nonprofits, many of whom are in the GPNP ecosystem, are providing, is an adjustment that we really need to be considering and acting on at this time to make sure resources are available to that group. For DEI, the DEI conversation, the appeals court has allowed the Trump administration to temporarily enforce a ban on DEI programs in federal agencies and businesses with government contracts, which reverses a previous injunction and raises concerns about the future of such initiatives. So we know that this has been a conversation for weeks, but over the weekend, an appeals court did allow a stay on the injunction. So the enforcement of this ban is going to lead to the discontinuation of DEI programs within affected organizations, and very much impacts efforts to promote diversity and inclusion. For nonprofits that are engaged in this work in Southwest PA, there's a couple of different impacts beyond funding and government contracts that would necessitate program modifications. As Tatiana shared at the beginning of the call, this is also impacting how we can do advocacy. If there are banned words that are making it impossible to talk about the impact of our work and its importance, there is a kind of a hold on language that is acceptable or allowable in order to be able to advocate for these things, even if it's in the vein of education versus lobbying. That makes it very difficult to share success stories and continue doing this work. And so one of the things in the GPNP space that we've been talking about is, as we're thinking about updating organizational information on our websites, because there are success stories of nonprofits that I've heard from who have changed their website wording, and a federal government agency that they're working with said, okay, that's acceptable, we'll continue funding your program. So there are bright spots in this, but even with those bright spots where the funding continues, advocacy is getting more difficult. And so my ask is that for as any folks who are interested in sharing success stories and weighing the impacts of what sharing those stories might mean for security, this is that kind of space of self-censoring and taking ourselves out of the conversation versus areas where we can mobilize and plan strategically to stay within the conversation, using particular language in a way that is very intentional and strategic, to make it kind of inarguable of the work of nonprofit organizations and the work that DEI affords, many of those we serve, is critical and also is a good economic investment. So, more to come in our public policy committee meetings, but I did want to share that. And then finally, legal cases. I mentioned that there's a lot of legal cases in response to executive orders and decisions of the Trump administration. I think a couple of weeks ago, it was somewhere over 100 court cases that were being brought against the existing executive orders. The takeaway is that as there's so much uncertainty in these policies, for the policies that are going to impact your mission area, understand what a injunction or stay would mean to you and the work that you're doing. Does that mean that you can continue business as usual, or does it mean that during the term of that, there's going to be a funding freeze and you're not going to be able to draw down additional funds? For opportunities like that, back in 2015 and 2016, when there was a delay on the Pennsylvania state government budget, one of the reasons that a lot of nonprofit organizations were negatively impacted is because nonprofits typically do the work first and then get reimbursed for that work that's taken place. When the budget was delayed by, I think it was 16 or 18 months, organizations had to take out loans to continue doing that work, and then they owed interest on those loans after they were finally able to receive those funds from the government. So even after they got the funds from the government, there were losses for their organizations. And so I want to mention that because what Katie shared earlier with the rainy day fund that is available for certain types of emergencies with nonprofits, having a 0% interest rate is critical as a resource at a time like this. And so looking at, the financial viability of your organization, areas where your funds are likely to be impacted, and ways that you can build relationships with organizations like Bridgeway that are grounded in supporting the realities and the uncertainty that many nonprofit organizations find ourselves in right now is critical. So as these legal cases are continuing and, progress is really unsure on many of them, there are wins. There are times where there have been injunctions or reversals of policies that make it easier for nonprofits to continue doing their work. But it really is case by case. And I'm going to share a link in the chat that is an overview of, it's kind of like a legislation tracker that has every executive order or action by the administration currently and where it stands legally. Before I get to that, there is a final update on environmental deregulation and impact that was shared over the weekend. So there have been over 30 protections related to air and water quality, specifically chemical safety and climate change policies that have been initiated or targeted to roll back their regulations through the Trump administration. The impact for nonprofit organizations, many of whom in Southwest PA are focused on air, water, and environmental quality, may need to intensify advocacy efforts to address potential increases in pollution to protect vulnerable communities from environmental hazards. The way that there have been words shared by the National Science Foundation that are not allowed in the DEI space, that same technical language I've not seen in the environmental space. And so talking about things like the impacts of deregulation, utilizing scientific terms and layman's terms to talk about the impacts on public health risks for communities is critical. And so I mentioned this last week, but there's that quote, why do you care about the environment? Why do you care about the climate? Because we live here. And so regardless of organizations' mission statements and the work that we're doing in Southwest PA right now, this is an area where clear avenues into advocacy still exist, where we can see some headway through, organization and continuing these conversations. I recognize we're a couple minutes over, so thank you so much for your time and attention this morning. We appreciate your presence with us. Next week, we'll be joined by a couple of members of one of our partner organizations, the Twin Cities Innovation Alliance, who are going to be calling in from out of state. Again, an example of the Forbes Funds ecosystem expanding beyond Pennsylvania, beyond Southwest PA. But where we can find some critical insights for how organizations and regions similar to ours are utilizing innovation as a way to respond to uncertainty and shape how we're doing this work better. So thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you next Monday and hopefully at Demo Day as well. I'm going to take a moment to add that legislation tracker link into the chat for anybody who's curious about more information. Otherwise, thank you, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you, Sarah.